I keep redworm composting worms. I feed them food scraps, and I used to use like bedding that was like leaves and shredded coconut husk called coconut core. And I realized that I can actually use horse manure instead because the worms can live in it, but they also eat it. So I found some horse stables, and I think it's really weird there's nobody here, but found some horse stables, and I got my buckets, and I got my tub right here. I can take about 50 gallons total, so I don't know what that actually translates to, but I don't know if this is like asphalt. But if you come over here, you can see they have just a huge, massive pile of manure. I reached out to the owner, and the owner said that I could take as much of it as I want. So you can see, actually the pile's pretty small right now. They must have, I think periodically they fill up those red dumpsters over there, and they probably pay to haul it away. So my ultimate goal is to convince them that they should let me compost with worms here, because not only am I going to reduce the amount of horse manure that gets thrown away and save them money, I'm also potentially going to have space to raise my worms, because as you'll see shortly, I don't have a lot of space at my house. So I have these big totes, I fill them up. I wish I could take more, and it's kind of gross as in my car. But here are the containers that I have. Like I said, it's about 50 gallons total. It's funny because my hands just get completely covered in horse manure. This actually has a lot of hay in it. It's just kind of funny because if you just put a pile of other type of manure on the ground, if you know what I mean, I would definitely not put my hands in it, but here I am, it's under my nails too. So, headed back. So, I got some of that fresh manure, and like I said, this one actually had a lot of straw in it. I don't know if they're cleaning out the stables or what, but it still works. And as you can see, just looking at it, it's a lot more brown than the manure is that's in the bin, because the manure that's in the bin's already started to get broken down by the worms. So you definitely want to make sure that you moisten it though, because worms are like about 87 to 90% moisture. So if you just threw a bunch of dry stuff in there, they literally would shrivel up and die, probably pretty instantaneously. Oh man. Here's the hard part, of course, which is lifting the bin up and getting it back in the container, because these things are pretty heavy once they're weighted down. So as you can see from this one, I actually put some of the horse manure in a few weeks ago, but I didn't finish it, so it's over here. Oops. So it's a pretty methodical process. I just go one at a time. I'm actually going to label this one. You can't see it right now, it's on the camera, but this one's container number 7. And like I said, I just do that. It's just good. At some point, when I start harvesting these worms, I'm going to want to know which container I took them out of and the amount of worms I took out. So that way I know how each bin is doing. Because if I harvested bins from this one, number 7, then I'm not going to want to harvest again a few weeks later. I'm going to have to allow more time. Check these out. It's hard to see, but it looks like they're doing great. Pretty much every tidbit of advice someone gave me about how to raise earthworms didn't really apply to me. Raising earthworms, they don't like spicy foods, they don't like tomatoes, they don't like acidic foods, they don't like this, they don't like that. I put everything in here. It's all about balance, well, not obvious, but it is about balance. So that's the one thing I do recommend is if you are not sure, just put a little bit at a time, and once you see how they respond to it, then you can add more. But honestly, these worms are all doing great. It's actually mostly castings over here. Wow. I also need to build up like a trommel screen or something to get the castings out. Because, man, let's see here. It's so hard to see these, especially when the light turns off, but right there is a little worm egg. So a future wormy. Each sac tends to have like 1 to 3 worms in it, so there's not tons of them, but they reproduce so quickly that it ends up just being a lot of worms. So I'm gonna actually, these are castings, I'm gonna move them over here because there's lots of worms in them, so I'm gonna spread the worms out. And the reason why I'm spreading the worms out is so that way they can kind of eat some of the food over here. Worms tend to regulate their populations, so the more, like if the worms don't have enough space, they just won't grow. They won't, or I shouldn't say they won't grow. They won't have worm babies. So maybe by spreading them out in the container, that'll help them continue to grow. While I'm here, I'm also going to continue to add some material, and like I said, I immediately have to add water to it because the worms are going to shrivel up and die if there's no moisture. So I added this manure for the first time from this particular place just a few weeks ago, and this is the first time I'm looking at it, and I was very impressed with how the worms are doing. Like, it's not too. I try to get manure that had been sitting as long as possible, but these stables generate so much manure that they get it emptied a lot. But anyway, so now that these ones are watered, continue to spread the bedding out so it's nice and even, and then hopefully the next time I open up this one and pull it back, we're going to start seeing more worms. Since we have more bananas, I'm going to add more bananas. And like I said, the worms, they like manure, but they love fruits and like food scraps and things a lot as well. So by adding this to the mix, I'm like hoping that it draws them into the center, but also encourages them to eat even quicker and reproduce even faster. What is this? What is this thing? Is that some sort of snail? I don't know. Huh, it's like a slug maybe. Huh, well, I'm just gonna put him in there. And guess he'll be around next time. See how he's doing. So as I was saying, people say you need to have as much air circulating as possible, which you do. But if you have too many opportunities for the air to circulate, what it actually does is, if too much air circulates, it dries the bins out, and you have to water them even more regularly. And since I don't have, I'm hand watering, it's obviously not the most ideal situation. This one actually has a lot of manure in it, but I'm going to add some more bananas. I guess I didn't get enough banana. I got about 15 pounds, 14, 15 pounds of bananas, and I think there's a few left over upstairs, but this is pretty much all I have left. kind of wild. So one of the benefits of feeding food scraps to earthworms and any organic material is end up diverting it from landfill. And as a lot of you know, when you put food scraps in and manure and other organic material in landfills without the ability to breathe, it breaks down anaerobically, which is a pretty big contributor to greenhouse gases. Like I was saying earlier, worms love to live in and eat horse manure, but I found that they respond even better to like a lot of fruit and other decomposing matter. So I have these bananas. I got them at clearance. They are, normally I would try and take the actual bananas for myself and just keep the peels for the worms, but oh well. So of course, unfortunately I have to take the label off of all of them. It's really annoying. So it's great to feed worms bananas or fruit and stuff. They seem to like it. They love the manure, but they really like fruit and things like this. And yes, this is a Vitamix that I'm putting my bananas into, so I'm sure they'd love to see the way I'm using this thing, but you know, it just works so well. So just trying to get as much of the label off as possible because I don't want that to be in the stream. Let's see here. I'll rotate it so that way I can get a better view. So that's one bag of bananas, about 7 pounds, so it's actually a lot of food to be feeding them. Let's see here. Check it out, banana puree for the worms. Like I said, normally I would eat the bananas, but these ones, unfortunately, were too far gone for even that. And I like to get them off the clearance rack at grocery stores. Sometimes they'll just give them to me, but even if they won't give them to me, it's still nice to do because I can get them for a discounted price, which is always nice. So I don't know why I'm even scraping this, because I'm about to get more bananas. I have a second bag. It's funny because I would consider eating these with the puree or with the peel in them, but my understanding is that bananas have lots of chemicals and things sprayed on them. It doesn't seem to bother the worms when it comes to eating the food, but it definitely would make me concerned about not wanting to eat a banana peel that's been sprayed with who knows what. If you're Chiquita Banana and you want to tell me what they're sprayed with, then I'd love to hear it. But it is kind of a shame when you think about it. These bananas came all the way from Guatemala, and they are going to be worm food. I mean, it's better than throwing them in the landfill, that's for sure, or even composting them. Because at least I know I'm going to grow some worms with with these bananas. too many and it's not spinning it. Let's see if that does. Let's see if that is the trick. Too busy talking, not paying attention. It would help if I put the blade back in, wouldn't it? Gosh, gotta be careful with that blade. When I first got this thing, the first thing I did was cut myself with the blade because it's very sharp. I friggin' love this thing. Let's try this again. Man, this looks like it should be good for now. So in case you're wondering why you puree the bananas, or just fruit in general, is worms don't have teeth. A lot of people don't realize that. They're like chickens. They have gizzards, but they don't have teeth. So just like a chicken has a beak and it pecks into the ground and picks up worms and other things for food, worms don't have teeth, but they do have gizzards. So usually worms don't actually eat food, they eat mold, things that have already started to decay. So by pureeing bananas, the fruit, whatever I'm putting in there, it's helping them with the decomposition process. And just from a practical standpoint, by pureeing it, it exposes more of the food waste to air, so it oxidizes and breaks down faster, and the worms will eat it once it's small enough for them to get in their mouths. So something like a pureed banana is very small. And they will also take little bits of sand and dust, ground up eggshells, and they will actually eat those when they eat the food. So as it goes through their body, the sand and other material will help grind the food down in lieu of them having teeth. So as I showed you earlier, I got my Prius loaded up with manure. Here's my setup in the carport here. I just have like these tubs that I found on Craiglist. I have 11 or 12 of them total, and I'll pull them up, uncover in a minute. I like them. They're stackable. I use these trays. This is actually my original worm bin right here. I made it myself, and there's a blog post on my website about it. Here's another worm bin that a friend of mine made and then didn't want to use. And then here are some castings that I harvested a few weeks ago, and I actually lifted up the bottom, and then I looked inside, and there's actually tons of worms in here too, so I didn't even know they were in here. But once again, this nice thing about using horse manure as your bedding, because they live in the horse manure, and they eat the horse manure. So yeah, you can see my containers, and I actually use these. I found them in the trash. They're like professional grade baking sheets, and I use them to cover the worms up, which is kind of funny, but comical, but whatever. So to show you a little bit more, I also have been in the process of like numbering them. Just forget my garbage over there. I gotta throw a bunch of stuff away. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not really tracking anything right now, but I figured it'd be a good idea to number them so that I can kind of at some point keep track of my progress. So like I said, a lot of people, they're like, oh, you need air to be constantly circulating, breathing and whatnot. Oh wait, look at that right there. They are making babies right there. You can see right there, little worm babies. But Oh man, I love this stuff, this bedding. I just freshened this up a few weeks ago, and you can already see got tons of pregnant worms. It's really cool. Like, that's actually a worm egg right there by my thumb. It's hard to see. A little tiny little thing. So I'm actually not going to do these ones right here yet because I have some that haven't been freshened up at all. So 5, 6. So I'll do those. I'll do these ones first. Like I said, it's just like a reminder. Labeling them as a reminder of which ones I've worked on at any given moment. So it takes a lot of strength to do with these things. So, like I said, I've already done the bottom two, but since I'm going to be taking these top ones off, I might as well put the bottom one on as well. And what I like to do is use crates as much as possible because the crates reduce, oh my god, this thing's heavy. The crates reduce the amount of like stooping and bending over and stuff I have to do. So, wow, check this out. All the worms in there. Look at my light. Really shining in there. Worms don't like light, so they're obviously gonna start to go down. But you can see just by shining the light in there. These are like seriously pregnant worms. They're like ready to lay eggs, which is pretty cool. Pretty cool to see. Oh man, they're everywhere. Worms love manure, it's great. Okay, so let's get this last one. So even though I freshened this one up pretty recently, I'm going to add some more to it because, look at these things. These are like some pregnant, look at these guys. They're like, this is multiple, they're going to be pissed off that I'm doing this, but sorry guys. It's like a multiple eggs, multiple things. It's like 2 worms laying multiple eggs at the same time. I didn't know they could do that. It's pretty cool. So whenever I do this, I know the worms don't like it, but I like to kind of stir the pot because that way it helps keep the air circulating. So like I was saying, you don't actually need like holes and stuff drilled into the worm bin when you have the air circulating. So even though I have those no holes in the sides of the bins and the air, or excuse me, I have the those metal lids on top. As you can see from when I was turning this over, that the worms are just doing great. So I might as well get some of my banana puree and put it on here in a minute. So here's what I'm going to do. The worms usually go towards food, even though there's manure in here. They really like food, so I'm gonna try to concentrate it into the area that I want them to go to, which is right down the middle essentially. And the next time I pull this up, you're just gonna see all the worms kind of congregated in that one center section. As it is, there's tons of mature worms in here, which is really cool. And I'm probably not gonna touch this for at least 2 weeks because there's lots of worms in here. They don't like to be disturbed, so every time I do this, it definitely irritates them. So I got so much banana that I don't really care if it's too much banana, because I can cover it up with the manure. It's really good to keep any like food that will spoil. Like manure doesn't spoil, it just kind of stays there and it dries out and whatever. But if it's food, like banana, like pureed bananas, or fruit, or some sort of animal byproduct, you definitely want to make sure that it's insulated with the manure or your bedding. And what that'll do is it'll help keep the stink down and keep the bugs and flies and stuff out. As you can see, these bins are predominantly horse manure, and there's no mess. You always want to water them, nice fresh water. I do have holes in the bottom on the corners of these bins, and you definitely want that because you want to make sure that any excess liquid can flow through and like go out of the bin. If you don't do that, then it can get kind of toxic if there's not enough moisture. But I've found that the manure is just such fluffy bedding that it doesn't seem to be an issue. So, as I did with the last one, I'm just going to kind of turn this over, and you can see that the worms are kind of near the top. Wow, they're everywhere. And if you see the difference in the color, the manure is black. The worm castings, excuse me, are black, which is essentially the worm's manure. Not essentially, it is the worm's manure. And the fresh horse manure is not black. It's, it's brown. But man, just as I dig through this, I can see that all these worms they're pretty much mature. They're having babies, which is actually really cool. And I can see they're really hard to point out in the camera, but there are a lot of worm eggs in here, which is great. This one's a little drier than I would like, but we're just gonna put some more banana in here, and then I'm gonna close the lid back on it, cover it back up. Ooh. Oh man. There's actually a bone that's been in there for a long time. It's not quite, it's super hard. It's like a chicken drumstick or something like that. There's a misconception in the worm world that worms don't eat different items. Well, worms pretty much eat everything. Like I said earlier, they eat material that's broken down. Decomposing and whatnot. So even if it's not they're not eating the meat itself, once the meat starts to get moldy, they will eat the mold. They don't really care. They eat anything that's dead and decomposing. Fill up my water pail and I'll be right back. So I am back. I refilled my water, and I realized that I should put the more water down first, because then if I put the new manure down without water, then I don't want the worms to dry out. As I was saying, even though this has lots of sawdust in it, sawdust actually makes good bedding, so it's not like bad for the worms. They just won't be able to eat it because it's going to be big chunks that aren't really going to break down. But when I go to harvest the castings, I can just filter out the sawdust and either put it in a garden somewhere or just bring it back to the horse stables where I get the manure from, and just dump it there. And when I get more manure, my long-term goal is to raise enough worms so that when it comes time to doing this, I could actually harvest. I could keep the worms, raise the worms, harvest the worms directly at horse stables. And by doing that, the goal would be to just makes a measurable enough dent in the amount of manure that gets thrown away that it ends up being financially beneficial for them. So it's going to take me probably another hour or two to finish doing this, so I'm just going to pause the camera for now unless I see something that jumps out at me.